humanity. Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome to New York Parrot's Foreign Policy Review. I am Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host, with Carlo Parcelli, my co-host. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Citgo in Venezuela. This is a topic not too popularized right now, but we want to address some of the concerns there and some of the question marks on that event. And we're going to talk a little bit opening up with the Elwood and Dorr debate on Dory's show that Carlo wanted to discuss. So, Carlo, would you like to share your comments on the Dorr show for the beginning of the show, and then we'll get right into the Citgo and Venezuela issue after that?
Yes, let's do it.
So Carlo,
I've got right behind me, I've got Lenny Bruce to moderate because Jimmy Dore and Graham Elwood, both of them are stand-up comics. And Jimmy Dore has a very popular YouTube podcast. He's on Rockfin. He's all over. He has over 900,000 subscribers, and so he's very influential. And he's been an advocate of no mandates. Now he began. I mean, he's flip-flopped a lot. He began with complaining about the fact that only rich people had access to the vaccine, but then he's morphed over now to he's brought up a lot of other arguments, but he's morphed over to the side of no mandates for being vaccinated. However, his friend of 30 years and a stand-up comic named Graham Elwood disagreed, so they had a debate recently. And I watched it a couple of times, and I was intrigued by several dimensions of it. Now, Dorr, his basic stance is if people don't want to get vaccinated, they don't have to get vaccinated. Setting aside the fact that people who are vaccinated are less likely to spread the disease among the unvaccinated, he said, well, if you're vaccinated and somebody doesn't want to get vaccinated, why should you care that you're spreading the disease among them? So it's and he associates the anti-mandate aspect, as does Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone, with this notion of being up against big pharma, of that leftist principle, that old leftist principle. We always talk about how we're eventually going to discuss this on our site, how the right has co-opted the left through people like Bannon, Steve Bannon. Dorr, he sees himself as a leftist because he's taking on the corporate power that really dominates the medium and dominates the who's vaccinated with what, when, and all of that sort of stuff. Now, Elwood's position is that if you're on the left, you should have a much more communal attitude toward this, that you should care if you're vaccinated, yet you could still spread the vaccine to someone that's not unvaccinated, that you should proselytize for mandates, that people should take the more altruistic position and want to save everybody. Now, I'll just tell you my position on that is that if Republicans, and this is people do studies all the time, or people who are unvaccinated want to die at 20 times the rate of unvaccinated people, I don't really give a shit. Let them die. If it's going to get me out into the public, and everyone I know out into the public without a mask on and without the concern, I would say get vaccinated. If you're not going to get vaccinated, then somebody ought to make you get vaccinated. So if it really were just a situation where they would go off and they would die. Frankly, I don't give a goddamn. I don't give a rat's rectum. Those people are a mess. But what occurred to me as I was watching this show was the connection between January 6th, the COVID, and the way and the let's call it far right response, with all the charlatans that are around, the 12 that are pointed out, that are making fortunes out of convincing people to drink their own urine, or convincing people that the shots are going to change their nervous system, that they're implanting things into their bodies, whatever the nonsense is. So I began thinking about that, and this is not exclusive to that side. We can call it, I guess we could call it the Republican side, because it's all based on delusion. You have the COVID delusions, and then you have the January 6th delusions. Now, the fact that the notion that Biden stole the election, I mean, I can't say one way or the other, because my long romance with books about the FBI and the CIA from the left, like Chomsky and Alfred McCoy and Michael Parenti, and dozens of books that I've read over the years. Peter Dale Scott, Alexander Coburn, you name it. I've read it. It's out there. I've read it. Okay, I know that, especially in foreign countries, the Central Intelligence Agency and the FBI early on, if you want to read Doug Valentine's book on it, they have been involved in elections, in stealing elections, and they've had all of these really diabolical methods for doing that. So that could have occurred, but there was 59 or 60 court cases, recounts, and everything, and nothing could be found in the Biden situation. So there's a point where you have to drop delusion, I would think. I mean, it's like Lenny Bruce once said about the Democratic machine, the Mayor Daley machine in Chicago. He said, "Hey, they're so corrupt, it's thrilling." Yes, they were corrupt, and they stole the election for President Kennedy. Yes, they did that. They did that, and it stands. Nixon did not ask his followers to storm the White House or whatever. But when a situation arises where people are bouncing from one set of delusions to another, you have the potential for a kind of violence that is not really something we've seen often in American political life, especially from the right. I mean, they talk a big game, and we had several instances of right wing confrontations. I mean, most recently, this guy was coming from California to come to Washington to murder Nancy Pelosi and Fauci and several other officials here in Washington. Some of them that weren't even in Washington. He's addled on top of everything else. But the fact that the thing that occurred to me as I was watching the Dore-Graham debate was that Jimmy Dore, even though he doesn't realize it, and this goes for Max Blumenthal too, whose research and reporting I greatly admire, generally, is that they are linking themselves up unknowingly with forces that will eventually explode into violence. The very relationship to Bannon. And there will be bloodshed. There will be a lot of bloodshed. Now, I want to make a distinction between the delusion on the left, the MSNBC delusion, and the delusion, the Fox News delusion, or even more radical than that, whatever it is, the AOL delusion, whatever the media outlet is. Now, the distinction with the MSNBC delusion is that it might involve something like Russiagate. So, and they're wrong. There was no grand design by Moscow to steal the election in favor of Trump. It wasn't. It didn't exist. It's a humorless piece of nonsense. And but the fact of the matter is, and we have this situation with Biden talking to Putin today on the phone, and this buildup around Ukraine, is that if you look at the geopolitical history of stuff, which is ignored in this Russiagate nonsense, the United States has completely blocked off the western borders of Russia with NATO powers, or Ukraine, which is not a NATO power, but is after a U.S.-led coup in 2009 by the Obama administration, is strongly pro-Europe, and they've set up these dozens of bases, many of them with nuclear tactical weapons on those bases. After they promised, and 12 European countries promised, with Gorbachev, the fool who couldn't see reality when it was right in front of him, with Gorbachev, that they would not progress. And James A. Baker said, we're not going to go one more inch with NATO. And this was way back. So you've got this kind of delusion on the left. Now, the difference with the delusion on the right is that it's comic book. It's insane. You could possibly say that this clickbait company in Russia spent $100,000 on these really misdirected comments that often had nothing to do with the election. They influenced the election. Well, that has its own kind of insanity, but at least it's based in some sort of reality. Although the Steele dossier was fiction and that sort of thing. Where are the P tapes? Show me the P tapes. But when it comes to the QAnon people, if you're up against, like they say, they don't like the way Black Lives Matter handles itself, or they don't like the way the pharmaceutical companies act. Well, if you didn't like the way the pharmaceuticals company act, why is your goddamn medicine cabinet filled with pills from those people? And every one of those fucking pills, because of the FDA and the CDC to a certain extent, has a warning label on them. You fucking idiots! Where were you 40 years ago? When there were people, real human beings on the left fighting against us, like Ralph Nader, who were really struggling against this, and you were making fun of them, you fucking idiots. So they can't do that. They can't cover that because they were too stupid to realize where their self-interest lied. Now they're in a situation where all they can embrace is this wackadoodle shit. And when you leave yourself open to irreality, you're going to be frustrated at every level. You're gonna storm the Capitol and nothing's going to happen. You're going to claim that the election was stolen, but it's going to go into the courts and nothing is going to happen. You're going to claim that you got to drink your own urine, or whatever to get over COVID because you can't take the vaccine, and you ignore the notion that people who are getting the vaccine are living, and people who aren't getting the vaccine are dying. If you want to accept those delusions, you're just going to become more and more frustrated. And it's like my uncle used to tell me in these tirades he and I used to have. He and his people have all the guns. and they're going to use them. And it's going to come to that. It's going to come to that because if you're fighting phantoms, you're going to shoot wildly. You're going to fucking shoot wildly. You don't know who you're going to kill, and you're not going to, and you're going to care. You're going to care afterwards because you're going to go for because there is a modicum of law and order. Some of you are going to go to prison for a long time. Some of you are going to regret your actions because they were foolish and stupid. But the bloodshed is going to come as long as the delusions hold sway. So to go back to the Jimmy Dore show, which actually is promoted a lot of these delusions, he thinks he has the facts. But if you just investigate, not very far, and I've done it, and I've written him like 60 comments trying to lay out where he's wrong. I mean, one, for example, he wants to talk about young people between a certain ages who when they're given a shot, the shots are not aspirated. The shot should be aspirated. Well, that's wrong. That's flat out wrong. You do not want aspiration when you get a COVID vaccine shot because it goes in the muscle, not into a blood vessel. So you don't want it to aspirate. You don't want to draw blood back into the needle because it's not supposed to fucking go into a blood vessel. But you think he can understand that? No. Like he says, he's just an ignorant comic. He doesn't know. So that's their defense. He just goes, I'm just a jag-off comic. It's like the Joe Rogan defense. What a fool. Just an out-and-out idiot. But by promoting these delusions, they're just leading. They're going down the garden path. I don't think Rogan or Blumenthal or Dore are aware of the kind of violence they're going to be associated with.
Now, I have a question. It seems like on both the right and the left, you're talking about the various distortions of reality that both prescribe or ascribe to the different sides. It seems like the one thing that they both have in common at this point is a general distrust of our institutions. Like we have big pharma, we have, even the democratic process is being questioned by the right. On the left, it's very similar. Our elections have been, tampered with or, been in some way modified. So why do you think people have come to this point where they don't trust our institutions as much as, say, maybe in the 80s or the 90s? Like the 90s was pretty stable, if I remember. There wasn't as much of this kind of heated argumentation about, what the democratic process was, or was it being tampered with? I mean, we never had these kind of really large scale mainstream discussions, but I think it's interesting that right now, like post 9/11, and then, of course, after Trump, there's all of this doubt about, whether or not our institutions are functioning properly. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a very good question. I think it comes down to the dichotomies. It's not just two; it's three. There's three dichotomies. There's the right, which is pretty much there's a moderate aspect to it, but that moderate aspect bleeds into the democratic left, what I would call the institutional left. Mm-hmm. Now, the institutional left, you can make a case if we're a foreign policy. We want to be a foreign policy program. You can make a case that the institutional left, as they're called, they're not the left. They're just like the so-called traditional conservative Republicans, essentially. Mm-hmm. They want to go to war with China and Russia. So they're promoting this Russiagate and this Chinagate shit. We have a story if we get to it. We probably won't. But they're trying to promote war. Mm-hmm. You look at MSNBC. It's all China this, China that. They're lying about the Uyghurs. They lied about Hong Kong, which has now been established. They're just lying about China. They're lying about the Taiwan situation. Lies, lies, lies. Now, you could say lies equal delusions. Well, they do when they get into the mind of the audience. So you have those people, mm-hmm. and then you have the new delusions on the far right who have borrowed the rhetoric. They borrowed my rhetoric. Pisses me off. Bannon stole it. But you could take me back to the Gulf of Tonkin. You could take me back to the Vietnam War, Iran-Contra. You want to talk for 15 hours straight about Iran-Contra? Come to my house, and I'll pull out a six-pack, and we'll talk about it. Iran-Contra, the October surprise, both Gulf Wars. What did little Bushy say about the second Gulf War? I mean, mission accomplished. So I did a editorial for the publication I was working for at the time called George Bush Lies to a Grateful Nation, and people were they were grateful to hear that. They were, it didn't matter that there was no WMD or anything like that. That came later. It was hard to believe for me, having gone through Iran-Contra and Vietnam, that these and many other minor conflicts and of subterfuge, to believe that people would fall for Colin Powell's speech at the UN and this notion. Now, but they did. So Americans are very, very heavily propagandized. It's been said over and over, the most heavily propagandized people on the planet. So when you think about the so-called left, which is not me, it's this essentially when they say the Republicans and the Democrats are the same, it's that group of people. They're very, very dangerous. They're the ones that have murdered tens of millions of people around the planet since World War II and before that. So, they're a lot more dangerous ultimately than the Bannon crowd, which is the Johnny-come-lately group of people. But, psychos get a lot of attention. And there's a lot of psycho out there right now. So, and what I'm trying to do is focus this notion that what I see in the Rogan, the Jimmy Dore, and even the Max Blumenthal aspect of attitude toward COVID is people who are really fomenting violence. It's like Jimmy says. He goes, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. He's vaccinated. He didn't get the booster because he claims he got side effect from it from the first two shots. But cause and effect. Oh God, we got to do away with cause and effect. We need the uncertainty principle for every fucking thing. Everything should be conditional because you get these asshole attitudes like Doors that I have this tinnitus and headaches, or tinnitus or whatever it's called, headaches. It came from the vaccine because it happened after I got the vaccine, the whole thing. So it's the whole notion that they're contributing. People who I traditionally would have seen coming out of the left are now contributing to this far right hallucinatory insurrectionist attitude, which has the potential, and I think will present itself in actuality, and quite soon. We have the 2022 elections coming up. Quite soon, that there will be a lot of violence. And
we're going to take a real brief break, and we'll be right back. We'll talk about Venezuela and Citgo, and that will be an interesting discussion in and of itself. So take a brief look at this break. We're watching Foreign Policy Review. Thank you. Hi, I am Dustin Pickering from Parrot Literary Corner. You know me, your noble and honest host, and I've got exciting news for you. Last anthology, Series 1, The Literary Parrot, did such a great job. We wanted to continue to provide this community service to our viewers and to our contributors to the program. So please get up and get a copy immediately. If you're in this book, you want to get a copy. If you're not in the book, you want to get a copy and see what we're doing. You want to be excited with us. We want you on this program, and we hope to see you sometime soon on The Literary Parrot. You have to get your hands on this copy. It's amazing. It's an absolutely beautiful anthology meant just for you, Our past guests have been invited back to contribute yet again to this series 2. We do this quarterly anthology. We will be doing this after our 200 episode milestone. As of this last quarter, we reached 200 episodes, and past that, get up and get a copy immediately. This is the only TV show on earth for creative writers, and our guests are amazing. They're also community activists building from the ground up. This program is for everybody out there who is a creative mind. Order several copies if you can and donate to local libraries. Give them to your friends, cousins, fans, supporters, anybody that you think loves poetry. And it's not just poetry in this book. Remember, this is creative mind. So we have prose, fiction, short stories, essays, artwork, anything you can think of, artistically creative, photographs. Everything in this book is packed. It is packed. It is just absolutely packed. If you want to get your hands on it now. Welcome back to the Foreign Policy Review. I am Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. We have Carlo Parcelli today. We just got through talking about the Door Show and the debate over vaccines and the possibility of a incoming violence. So let's go right into the Citgo in Venezuela situation. So tell us a little bit about that, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to mention well, I have nothing to add to the other thing, but believe me, if I cared more about the American people, then I would be genuinely concerned. But I thought I'd take a little time and point out that insight. The Venezuelan situation. Well, let's see. Let's cover a number of dimensions, from the reporting on Venezuela to the actual situation on the ground, to U.S. sanctions and so on and so forth. And it begins with the title of this article. The title of the article is Venezuela Denounces U.S. Court Ruling Over Citgo. Well, the first question you have to ask yourself is, which fucking Venezuela are you talking about, you idiot? Are you talking about Guaido's Venezuela? Because that's who's controlling Citgo right now. Or are you talking about Maduro's Venezuela, the people's Venezuela? You got to be more specific, lad. More specific. He goes on to say, a government rejects decision to order sale of Venezuelan oil company, which has 6th largest refinery network in U.S. Okay, the government. What government? What government? The U.S. government? The international court? Venezuelan government? Well, he means the U.S. government. This is from oddly enough, this is from a court case that was just heard in Joe Biden's state of Delaware, where all kinds of national, international corporations are incorporated because you can do it with no scrutiny and no charges and that sort of thing. Okay. So this guy goes on. Let's see. It goes, the Venezuelan government on Sunday rejected a decision by a U.S. federal court in a legal dispute over Citgo Petroleum Corporation, calling it a hostile judicial process. Still, we're into the fucking article, and we don't know if it's Guaido's faux imitation bullshit government, a guy who never won one goddamn vote for president in Venezuela, him and his little henchman, Carlos Vecchio, or if it's the legitimate government that's here, that's being processed here. It's an important distinction to know who we're talking about government-wise. It's like, it's too typical of reporting. It's too typical. People should get that through their head. They have to read a lot more, or they can't be influenced by one Twitter comment or one article. Anyway, let's go on. The court approved the sale of the shares of Citgo's parent company, Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, to pay defunct Canadian gold miner Crystalex $1.4 billion expropriation of its assets in Venezuela. Okay, They didn't say that Chavez expropriated the assets of the Crystalex, but he did. He did. And the old Venezuela, not Guaido, the Chavez Maduro government paid back $500 million of that. Now, if you can't pay of the $1.4 billion of confiscated property, now it's unbelievable because the whole fucking time the United States had imposed draconian sanctions on Venezuela. They were trying to cripple it through sabotage, through invasions, through coups, everything they could do to destroy the economy. You remember Henry Kissinger's phrase, I want to make the Chilean economy scream. That's what they're doing to Venezuela. Yet, Venezuela, under Chavez and Maduro, managed to pay back $500 million of that. Guaido, he didn't pay back a penny. He and his cronies stole it all. Let's go on here. But there's no mention of that in this article. You got to focus on how bad this journalism is. Just ridiculous. The court's ruling comes at a time when the ownership of Citgo is being disputed between the government of President Nicolas Maduro and Venezuela and the Venezuelan opposition and the PDVSA. Well, the Venezuelan opposition, they don't want to say Guaido because Guaido he's pretty much defunct. Him and his cronies have stolen hundreds of millions of dollars. And he's accomplished the task that he wanted U.S. foreign policy makers to do for him. The Boltons, the Pompeos, the Elliott Abrams. What he's done is he's bankrupted this very important company to the Venezuelan people, the one that subsidizes their gasoline use so that their gas is free, but also brought in important income so that the Chavez Maduro, the Bolivarian Revolution, could provide housing, could provide education, could provide food, could provide health care, could provide infrastructure to the poor in Venezuela. Well, Uncle Slimy can't have that. We can't, the United States. Oh, we can't have people being allowed to climb out of poverty. So we'll just have this fraud named Guaido. Will give them this asset because it's incorporated in Delaware, and we'll let him ruin it. We'll let him piss it away, which he did. Great jobs, Guaido. Okay. So it goes on. The case over Citgo is taking place in Wilmington, Delaware. Oh, well, we know that because I brought it up. Their judge, Leonard Stark, is ruling in favor of Crystalex. Crystalex went bankrupt 9 years ago, and since then, the company has been trying to recover its investment in Venezuela. Okay. Like I said, the investment, if Maduro was allowed to run the Venezuelan economy without interference from the U.S., enormous interference from the U.S., he probably could have paid back Crystalex. He probably could have paid Crystalex for their assets. But now Crystalex had to go to court to try to get control, or at least partial control, of the oil company, which is the Venezuelan people's patrimony. It's their lifeblood. So it's just another way for the United States to starve people in Venezuela, to starve little children. That's what Washington is all about. How many little children can we bomb and starve? If we can't rip them to pieces with bombs, let's just starve them. That's Washington. That's U.S. foreign policy in a nutshell. Nothing beyond that. That's why when you hear people talk about China and their human rights record or their foreign policy, the United States has 800 foreign bases. China has one in Djibouti. The United States has killed tens of millions of people since World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, destabilization of the Middle East, two Iraq wars, Syria, Libya, all over the world. Kosovo, breakup of Yugoslavia, all of that. The United States has been behind all that shit and more, and especially in Latin America too. I hate to leave Latin America out. And so they perhaps killed 50 million people, and the Chinese maybe 2 million with their much maligned by the West supposed imperialism. Who are the real imperialists? Who are killing just exponentially more people as we speak? As we speak, we're doing the same. We just went into Ethiopia. We just sent 1,000 National Guard troops to Ethiopia. What a foolish thing. But that was after destabilizing South Sudan, you know about the destruction of Libya, Morocco, and putting the screws on Eritrea. And you could go on and on and on. It's just absurd. Jesus Christ. So anyway, let's just move on here. In 2011, Crystal X's Venezuelan operations were nationalized by former President Hugo Chavez. Oh, yes, okay. Crystal X argued that since the Venezuelan government never repaid them for their investment of $1.4 billion, the Canadian company had the legal right to go after PDVSA, which is the parent company for Citgo. Since the legal fight began, the Venezuelan government has paid $500 million of the $1.4 billion to Crystal X. So he's just confirming what I was saying. But the legal argument used by Crystal X is far from orthodox because under U.S. law, there is a presumption of independent status between a state and its companies that as such, the Venezuelan state and PDVSA should be legally treated as separate entities, including PDVSA's subsidiaries such as Citgo. So what they're saying there is you have the state and then you have this private corporation, which is PDVSA, which is the parent company of Citgo, and that they're two separate things. But, and I think there's some argument for this, Crystal X says that PDVSA was nationalized. Well, actually, it was always nationalized, but Citgo, that subsidiary, was nationalized by Chavez. Ergo, it's the same entity as the government. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but that does make a little sense to me. But they were getting paid back. This whole notion that they didn't get anything is a little absurd. I mean, they might have objected to it, but before Chavez nationalized it, they were just simply taking all the money out of the country. I mean, all the revenue that they earned at all the Citgo gas stations around the United States went to Wall Street. So, Chavez, he thought maybe some of it should go to Venezuelans. Do you think? It's their fucking oil. Okay, moving on. However, Judge Stark ruled that the Venezuelan state had erased the lines between the government and oil company, and because of this, they should be legally treated as the same. It's called nationalization. His argument comes from the basis that the Venezuelan government had extensive control over PDVSA, which means the PDVSA has been acting as the alter ego of the state. And I've written down here, but now that control is largely in the hands of Guaido and his buddies. So, Pete, the judge is wrong in the sense that he wants to conflate it with the Maduro government now, because the Maduro government, as far as the U.S. is concerned, because of their judgments in Delaware, now that Citgo belongs to Guaido. And Guaido and his buddies have stolen all the money from it. And he had a lot of American help. There's a lot. He had a lot of Wall Street brokers stealing that money with him, So the judge in that sense is wrong because Maduro has no control over Citgo anymore. It's Guaido that has control Though, I think he's pretty much out the door. I think he's getting the bums rush from the U.S. eventually, because there's only 16 countries in the whole world now that recognize him as the authority in Venezuela, and they're just doing it under pressure from the U.S. They know it's just a bullshit lie. Okay, let's move on. We're almost done here. Under U.S. law, for a judge to argue on these grounds, the following factors have to be taken into consideration. The level of economic control by the government. We just covered that. The government of Maduro has no economic control over Citgo now. Whether the entity's profits go to the government. The entity's profits, if you believe the Maduro government is the legitimate government, the entity's profits absolutely do not go to the Maduro government. They go, there are no profits. It's been bankrupted. But if there were profits, it would go to Guaido. Initially, there were profits, and Guaido stole them. Yeah, okay. The degree to which government officials manage the entity or otherwise have a hand in its daily affairs. Well, once again, Maduro and his people have no management control over Citgo. It's Guaido. Guaido's supposed to. Now, he has no management apparatus. He has no management framework in place. His management framework consists of going to the bank and taking out $10, $15 million and spending it on him and his cronies. That's his management. He has nobody running Citgo. He doesn't care. He doesn't know anything about how to do it. He's a little idiot. He's just this little puppet that the U.S. wanted to go in and bankrupt this aspect of PDSVA. And he did a brilliant job. He fucked it right up. Okay, let's see. And whether the government is a real beneficiary of the entity's conduct, no, it's not. And 5, whether adherence to separate identities would entitle the foreign state to benefits in U.S. courts while avoiding its obligations. Well, that would be between Guaido and the creditors at Crystalex. I can tell you. Let me tell. This is. Let me speak directly to Crystalex right now, and the former CEOs and everyone that's expecting to get something back as an asset from Guaido. You're not going to get anything. He's fucked you. He's fucked you. The U.S. government has fucked you. John Bolton fucked you. Pompeo fucked you. Elliot Abrams fucked you. This was all by design. They don't give a shit about you. They don't care about a U.S. corporation or the U.S. workers that were part of that corporation or their pensions or anything. Jesus Christ. Okay. According to Judge Stark, each day Crystalex's $1.4 billion debt goes unpaid. Now, see, this is where the journalist comes back in. We have to teach journalists math. We have to teach them math. I know it's probably beyond their ability to comprehend. But if $500 million has already been paid back and there's no interest attached to the assets, there has been no interest attached. $500 million has been paid back. Somebody only owes $900 million, not $1.4 billion. But that's just the journalist bad. He was a journalist. They can't do math. Okay. And then Judge Stark says, those days must soon come to an end because he doesn't even fucking know what's going on. He has no idea. He can't even distinguish between who's in control of the government and who's not in control. Who's in control of Citgo and who's not in control of Citgo any more than this fucking journalist can, apparently. Okay, and there's a twist at the end. The twist is too much. You'll love this. However, none of this can happen until the U.S. Treasury Department lifts its ban over the sale and transfer of Citgo and its shares. Now, why would the U.S. Treasury Department have a ban on the sale and transfer of Citgo and its shares, which are now in the toilet and basically worthless. Why would they do that? Well, this is too much. Okay. Initially introduced in October 2019 by the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, the ban prohibits Citgo's creditors from taking over the company. This prohibition is particularly important from the U.S. perspective because in an eventual takeover from creditors, Russian state oil company Rosneft would have the rights to the majority of Citgo's shares and control of the industry for that matter. In other words, the whole fucking thing would flip over to the Russians. They would own Citgo. So they would own all the gas stations all over the United States. They would own all the tankers that bring the fuel and the gasoline to the United States, so on and so forth. Russia. So this is how just idiotic U.S. foreign policy is, because they can't liquidate the company, because if they liquidate the company, the Russians will own it. It'll be a Russian company, unless they just simply give it back to the Venezuelans, which they might. Okay, since Venezuelan government defaulted on a series of bonds. Now, the Venezuelan government, this is the confusion of this idiot here. The Venezuelan government he's talking about here is the Guaido government. This is the Guaido. They're the ones that defaulted on the bonds. It wasn't Maduro. He had no control over the bonds. Guaido stole the money that was backing up the bonds. So here you can't make any sense of this article unless you know a little bit about Venezuela, or actually maybe a lot. I don't know. You measure it. Okay. Defaulted on a series of bonds that had Citgo as collateral that are primarily owned by Rosneft. That's the Russian company. So they control the bonds. Well, poor Russians, you got a bunch of useless, valueless bonds now. Tough break. Okay, almost done. Ultimately, if Rosneft or any other creditor were to gain control over Citgo, Venezuela would be losing ownership of its most important asset abroad, which was what Pompeo and Bolton and Elliott Abrams had in mind. Let's starve those fuckers. They don't deserve to eat. Who are they? Little brown people. We hate little brown people. Let's kill them. That's U.S. foreign policy in a nutshell. Okay. Currently valued at $10 billion, Citgo owns oil and gas pipelines throughout the U.S., about 5,000 gasoline stations across 30 states, and 3 major refineries with the capacity to process 750,000 barrels of oil a day, making it the 6th largest refinery network in the U.S. So the U.S. currently, well, actually, these figures are much lower in actuality. The Guaido government, ideally, is supposed to be refining 750,000 barrels of oil a day, which it's not. It's far below that. So here you have it. They can't basically auction off the company, because the first people in line as creditors, so it wouldn't really be an auction, but the first people in line as creditors are the Ruskies. It's Putin and the oligarchs in Russia. So, I mean, I don't want to repeat this, because frankly, it's too arcane and stupid to even imagine. Just, wouldn't it have been easier to let Maduro and Chavez? I mean, why did you have to kill Chavez? You assassinated him with, put cancer in his tortillas or whatever. But why did you do that? Why didn't the U.S. just simply allow Venezuela to flourish under Chavez and Maduro, like it was, like the World Bank said it was, like the IMF said it was, that it wasn't borrowing any money from. Why didn't the U.S. just let them? Why didn't let's let the people eat? Why did it have to do this? It's completely destroyed, and now it's going to be in utter limbo. So it's just going to rust away. It's going to rot away, and it's so typical of U.S. foreign policy. And you got to ask yourself, was it short-sighted? Did they not take Rosneft into consideration when they handed it over to Maduro? Would you like? I mean, I've just been prattling on. Do you want to add anything to that?
I'm just listening. We got about 9 minutes or so left in the show. If you want to just wrap it up and tell us what your conclusions are.
Well, yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up was simply this warmongering about China.
Mm-hmm.
The other day, as I like to read the articles and watch the videos from the Gray Zone, and it's been kind of infiltrated in the YouTube list because obviously they don't like what the Gray Zone has to say, but they put up the CSIS, which is the Green Kirkpatrick old think tank, still down here in Washington, though that bag of bones is long dead, thank God. She's not giving Jonas Savimbi blowjobs anymore. But the headline on their little video piece was China attacks Taiwan. China did not attack Taiwan. They had exercises off their own shores in the North China Sea. They didn't drop one bomb. They did nothing to China. I mean to Taiwan. And that's the kind of inappropriate warmongering. We're talking about millions of people dying, and these people are warmongering. Now that's where we come full circle here. There's one thing that these clowns that stormed the Capitol have finally figured out, that they don't want to be doing 3 and 4 tours in Afghanistan just to have the United States get up and leave, and they accomplished nothing there, and they know they didn't. There is a kind of strong anti-war sentiment. Now, the problem is it's conflicted because they want you got to love the troops and blah blah blah. So it's conflicted, but at least you're not getting that kind of warmongering out of them. I mean, you have people like Rand Paul, who's libertarian, who's against foreign incursions. So you've got that element. But these people, if you want to compare those people to, say, today's Democrats, like Biden and Blinken and Samantha Powers and other dick fucks like that, who don't mind murdering millions of people, you really can have a little sympathy for these yahoos that stormed the Capitol, because frankly, Nancy Pelosi's far more a warmonger. Hillary Clinton's far more of a warmonger than I would imagine Steve Bannon is, or even Donald Trump. He tried to unify North Korea. It took Bolton and Pompeo about 24 hours to make sure that didn't happen. North and South Korea tried to unify the Koreas. Of course, Trump didn't know what he was doing, but he thought he could, it'd be great for his legacy because he only cares about himself. He's just an egotistical fool. But there was that element there, and his rank and file are just fucking tired of doing tour after tour after tour for the empire. They've basically had enough. I think it's another element of the frustration that led to January 6th and has led to this anti-vaccination thing that they don't want to do anything that the government tells them. They've had it up to here, or up to wherever they've had it, or up the wazoo, because they didn't pay attention before and they got fucked. people like me paying attention, we didn't get fucked. That's all I can tell them. So that's it. I'm done.
Excellent. So we wrapped it up. We'll wrap it up here. And, we talked about, we opened up with the door show and talking about the vaccine mandates, and went into Citgo in Venezuela towards the latter half of the show, and then wrapped it up with some thoughts on anti-war and the troops and Afghanistan and some of those issues related in the sort of inherent contradiction possibly in the right wing of wanting to support the troops, but at the same time saying that, we have the warmongers on the Democrat side who are worse than Donald Trump or, so forth. And so we had an interesting discussion today with Carlo Parcelli. And if you haven't watched it, go ahead and go back and watch this YouTube again. Subscribe while you're at it. And later on today, 4:00 p.m. Central Standard Time, you're going to be seeing the Literary Corner back in action with Richard Lamoureux from Canada. And he will be on the show to discuss his work as well as his thoughts on aesthetics and poetry. And so we hope to see him pretty soon here in just a few hours. So keep an eye out, and we'll be discussing next Thursday. We'll be back on this show again, the Foreign Policy Review, with me and Carlo talking about whatever's on our minds at that point. So just keep an eye out. And again, subscribe to the channel. And I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you did, leave some comments, like, love, and share our content and get the word out for us. And again, check out the Literary Parrot Anthology Series 2. That'll be a wonderful addition to your collection if you're interested in poetry or you're interested in arts. There's some also, some heavy political poems in there, and there's also a lot of interesting work on any subject, the poetry can cover. So social subjects, private subjects, anything you can think of. So you guys out there, just buy a copy right now. Get out there, and again, subscribe to the channel. We need subscribers. We're looking for as many subscribers as possible to get this network going. So please keep us in your mind and thoughts, and share our content again and again. Just keep sharing it, get it out there, help proliferate these images of interesting arts and political commentary that you're not hearing in the mainstream. Thank you so much for watching the show today. I'm Dustin Pickering. We had Carlo Parcelli as co-host, and this is the Foreign Policy Review. Get out there and do some reading. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Hi, I am Dustin Pickering from Parrot Literary Corner. You know me, your noble and honest host, and I've got exciting news for you. Last anthology, Series 1, The Literary Parrot, did such a great job. We wanted to continue to provide this community service to our viewers and to our contributors to the program. So please get up and get a copy immediately. If you're in this book, you want to get a copy. If you're not in the book, you want to get a copy and see what we're doing. You want to be excited with us. We want you on this program, and we hope to see you sometime soon on the Literary Parrot. You have to get your hands on this copy. It's amazing. It's an absolutely beautiful anthology meant just for you. Our past guests have been invited back to contribute yet again to this Series 2. We do this quarterly anthology. We will be doing this after our 200 episode milestone. As of this last quarter, we reached 200 episodes, and past that, get up and get a copy immediately. This is the only TV show on earth for creative writers, and our guests are amazing. They're also community activists building from the ground up. This program is for everybody out there who is a creative mind. Order several copies if you can, and donate to local libraries. Give them to your friends, cousins, fans, supporters, anybody that you think loves poetry. And it's not just poetry in this book. Remember, this is creative mind. So we have prose, fiction, short stories, essays, artwork, anything you can think of, artistically creative, photographs. Everything in this book is packed. It is packed. It is just absolutely packed. If you want to get your hands on it now,